Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Prepare to celebrate our next Daring Cities plenary. Climate Emergency Mobilization, the necessity to act now. Thanks to German partners that made this happen, as in 2020, Daring Cities is becoming one of the best virtual and sustainable conferences around the world. As our General Secretary said, Daring City is the space to hear the voices of regional and local governments. Facing a reality, the global warming and its consequences, we cannot stop our actions to fight this problem. Climate emergency declarations is one of the steps to deal with. According to the Climate Emergency Declaration and Mobilization in Action Initiative, as of June 2021, 2,000 local governments in 34 countries had declared a climate emergency. Through Race to Zero and Race to Resilience initiatives led by UNFCCC, high-level climate action champions, hundreds of cities, towns, and regions are now committing to climate neutrality and climate resiliency towards 2050, including setting ambitious midterm targets to be met by 2030. Further commitments on circular economy, nature, and mobility are evolving through numerous partnerships. Experiences from the Dominican Republic, Rwanda, USA, as well as evolving efforts in South Korea are part of this movement. In this sense, it's a pleasure to me to start this conference with the activities of today. I would like to introduce a poll for the audience, and I ask you to fulfill this one during the next keynote speaker. Has your city or region already declared a climate emergency? Yes, no, no, but we fall under a higher level of government, or yes, and I was directly involved in the process. So, I am honored to introduce our keynote speaker, Johan Rockström, Director of Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research and Professor in Earth System Science at University of Potsdam, Germany.
So, dear colleagues, thanks for inviting me to this important meeting of the Daring Cities 2021. What I'd like to do is to provide you with a scientific update on the state of the post-pandemic climate challenge we're facing. And this is not only a climate transition, it is really the question of how are we now going to avoid destabilizing the entire Earth system and thereby undermining the climate system and risks of livelihoods and well-being for all future generations on planet Earth. It has come to this through the scientific evidence that we today have unequivocal support for, that we've entered a new geological epoch, the Anthropocene. We are now, the modern world, us humans, the dominating driving force of change on the entire planet. The scale, the speed, and the interconnectivity of impacts are unprecedented, exponential, and impacting today across all economies, across all societies. Cities where we have today roughly 50% of world population, projected to 60–70% over the next few decades, are not only the main livelihood source for the majority of the world populations, is not only the driving force of our economies and our socioeconomic development, it's also cities that are largely unprepared for the adaptive capacities, but also for the resilience building and for the transitions towards what I call zero carbon adaptive capacities required over the next 30 years. We know that roughly 60% of the cities we need in the world are not even built yet, just in terms of the rapid growth of urbanization in the world. So here we have a pivotal point for humanity's future. And this now has to be put in the context of the unequivocal scientific evidence we have of a global climate crisis. The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change 6 assessment, came out now in August, its first report, showing very dramatic numbers. So not only are we today having 100% unequivocal certainty that we're causing global warming, which had reached 1.1 degrees Celsius, the warmest temperature on Earth since we left the last ice age 12,000 years ago. We also know that we're loading so much climate forcing through greenhouse gas emissions that is the highest level in 2 million years. We have the fastest rate of sea level rise today at 3, soon 4 millimeters per year, 4 centimeters per decade, 25 centimeters so far. Arctic sea ice is melting exponentially. We are losing glaciers at an unprecedented scale, the source of fresh water to many parts in the world, having impacts that are today not only well documented, but incredibly hardly felt among urban and rural societies across the world, with extreme heat, heavy rainfall, droughts, fires, ocean acidification impacting. And we've seen just the last few years, heat waves across Europe, the unprecedented impacts in both the US, in Caribbean, in monsoon hitting in Mumbai, so on and so forth. Where does this come from? Well, it's not only the heating in the atmosphere, it's also that we know the basic physics. For every 1 degree Celsius warming, we also load the atmosphere with 7% more moisture. We are powering up the system very rapidly with more extreme rainfall events. Water is generally the #1 cause for disasters, droughts, floods, sea level rise. These are the hurricane impacts. These are the factors we now see already coming so hard and faster than we had expected. But most importantly, I would argue in the IPCC latest assessment is this graph. Not only does it show, as you see, the classic hockey stick of remarkable speed of the warming caused since we started burning fossil fuels, but it also confirms that over the past 100,000 years, we've never passed 1 degree Celsius. So we have already now, at 2021, crashed through the ceiling of the warmest temperature on Earth over the past 100,000 years. And just look at the remarkable stability on Earth over the past 2,000 years and how we are today passing very rapidly in the Anthropocene outside of that corridor. The impacts of this are felt today, but look at the scenarios for the future. Here is one basic scenario that leaves many scientists with deep nervousness. What you see here in color is the very well familiar maps of socioeconomic fragility or stability. So the darker the blue, the more stable economies, the darker the red, the more fragile economies. This is a well-known pattern. What you see here in the dark blobs here are the regions in the world that today have an annual mean temperature exceeding 30 degrees Celsius. So these are, not surprisingly, small spots in the Sahara Desert, hosting overall less than 150 million people. This is because we have physiological experience that if you have an average temperature above 30 degrees Celsius, we simply have large threats for human health and even risks of mortality. But look at the hatched-lined areas. This is the geographic expanse of regions that will have at least 30 degrees Celsius of average mean annual temperature if we continue burning fossil fuels as today, already in 50 years' time. So this is 2070. This is just 2 generations away. And look at the areas. We're talking Brazil, West Africa, Horn of Africa, North Africa, Middle East, India, Southeast Asia, projected to host 3.5 billion people in only 50 years' time. This is a geopolitical destabilizer of grand scale. So this is what we're facing if we do not bend the curves right now. But it's even more challenging than that, because it's not only about phasing out fossil fuels, it's about, as IPCC concludes, about maintaining the carbon sinks in nature. 56% of our emission of greenhouse gases since we started burning fossil fuels have been taken up of land-based ecosystems, primarily forests, and the ocean. And I can tell you that all the scenarios that scientists show can take us to the Paris Climate Agreement of keeping the global warming well below 2 and aiming for 1.5 assume that this capacity will remain intact, meaning that we depend not only on phasing out fossil fuels, we depend also on keeping ecosystems intact, rainforests, temperate forests, wetlands, grasslands, permafrost, So this is the challenge we have. But the IPCC also concludes that we already today face long-term commitments of irreversible changes in terms of ocean acidification, in terms of deoxygenization of coastal zones, meaning dead zones in the ocean. In terms of sea level rise, up to 1 meter this century, we cannot exclude 2 meters this century. But look at the third point here. Over the next 2,000 years, we are already at 1.5 degrees Celsius, very likely committing all future generations to up to 2 meters sea level rise. It will take long time before it materializes, but it's irreversible. These are commitments that we decide now whether we're handing over a planet to all future generations with a lesser capacity to support human livelihoods. But we can also not, in the latest IPCC assessment, exclude tipping points. This is still high uncertainty scientifically, but these are what is generally called low probability, high impact events. This is, to put it simple, catastrophic risks. The risks of destabilizing the West Antarctic ice shelf with multi-meter sea level rise occurring much faster. The risk of destabilizing the ocean circulation in North Atlantic, the AMOC, which changes life conditions in the Northern Hemisphere and even impacting on monsoon systems. The Arctic and practically losing summer ice there over the next decade. So these are risks of tipping points that we have been mapping outside of the IPCC, shown here in black, the 9 out of 15 known big climate tipping elements that are showing signs of approaching tipping points. So not that we are at the tipping points, but that we are at risk. And what you see here are not only big systems like permafrost, coral reefs, rainforest, West Antarctica, boreal forest, Greenland. You see also the arrows that they are interconnected with each other. We lose ice melting on Greenland, releasing cold fresh water into the North Atlantic, slowing down the ocean heat circulation, the AMOC in the North Atlantic, which in turn, as far as we know today, impacts on the monsoon system in South America, which can explain more droughts and forest fires in the rainforest, but it also holds more warm water in the Southern Ocean that gets locked there and can explain the rising melt of the West Antarctic ice shelf. So it's not surprising that the IPCC concludes that the pathway to the future is the lowest blue line here. It's about bending the global curve of emissions today and landing at a net zero world economy by mid-century. That is the pathway, and it is a pathway which, almost personally at least I feel, can lead to over-optimism to some extent, because here are the carbon budgets associated with that pathway. To land at 1.5 degrees Celsius, for a 50% chance, we have 500 billion tons of carbon dioxide remaining that we can be allowed to emit. Well, but a 50% chance of avoiding potential disasters in the future seems to me like, betting on something with much too high risk. So if we want to have a 2/3 chance of success, we have only 400 billion tons remaining. And divide by 42, which is what we emit today every year, we have less than 10 years remaining if we continue burning as today. So this just shows us that this is an urgent point of turnaround. But just to give you the summary of what this entails, well, the turnaround is shown in gray here, which is, landing at a net zero world economy by mid-century. It follows the carbon law of cutting emissions by half every decade, but that won't be enough. We also need to turn around the food system, agriculture, shown here in the brown wedge, which is a large emitter today, to become a sink of carbon from mid-century onward. We also need to start scaling negative emission technology through CCS and BECCS, shown here in orange. But most importantly, we have to maintain the carbon sinks in nature, shown here in green and blue. So there is no safe landing unless cities in the world start taking a full systems approach to decarbonizing, sustainable food systems, and maintaining carbon sinks along the whole value chain to nature. How are we doing today? Well, we're heading towards 2.7 degrees Celsius in the latest update of the national determined contributions. And the journey we need to follow, all cities in the world, all nations, is shown here. We are at a point where, just look at the United States and EU and Japan to the left, where the turnaround to reach zero by 2050 is a dramatic transformation. But look at China, which has now committed to net zero no later than 2060. Too late scientifically, but just look at the journey they have to take. So we're talking about big turnarounds that have to occur this century, this decade, and has to happen over the next 30 years. And of course, cities are fundamental to get that momentum off the ground. But I just want to leave you with the fact that it is about staying within the safe operating space of planetary boundaries. There's no way that we can land Paris by only decarbonizing the energy system. We need to stay within planetary boundaries also of nature so that we can come back to the green space here, and not in order to sacrifice or back off from good human well-being and equity, but rather placing the Sustainable Development Goals, all the 17 goals of aspiring good future for humans living in cities and in rural areas within the safe operating space of a stable and resilient planet. We've come to that. That's the way to navigate the Anthropocene. And of course, daring cities is, I would argue, one of the major leverage points of potential success in that transformation. Thank you very much, and good luck with your important work.
Thank you, Professor Rockstrom. We are very pleased to hear you. In this session, obviously, we are discussing the difference between ongoing climate action and action in a state of climate emergency, as well as the critical dimension of urgency, the need to act now, and the significant risks of inaction. The ICLEI network and its pathways contribute to solve this problem. In this sense, I'm pleased to introduce my colleague Yunus Arikan, Director of Global Advocacy at ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability, who will be hosting the following session, Putting Words to Action Beyond Declaring a Climate Emergency. Welcome, Yunus.
Thank you, Edgar. Thank you for the kind introduction. And it's a great honor for me to join this session to moderate the dialogue in the next 15 minutes. We have followed a similar format in the morning session, according to, of course, the European time frame. And we had another dialogue with two ambitious local leaders, the mayor of city of Bonn and mayor of Makati City, again with the representative from youth constituency to the UNFCCC. And the logic was really to discuss how we'll respond to the message, the clear message from Dr. Rockstrom, saying that, yes, if we want to reach the goals, cities are key. But which cities? We all know there are hundreds of thousands of cities, or if tens of thousands of cities across the world. And we are also aware that not all of them have neither committed to climate neutrality nor climate emergency yet. However, we know daring cities is the place where we combine most of them. And in fact, in the morning and in the two sessions, we have around 600 participants in total joining us. And we had the polls where more than 60% of those participants said that they are living in a city who has committed to a climate emergency or in the process of committing to a climate emergency. Again, another 60% already said that, yes, we are living in a city which has ambitions that is equal to or above the national or global average. So in that sense, if we have to make a change, if the cities have to move, there are pioneers, and the pioneers are here at the daring cities. So in this session, we will have two of them, one and local leader, mayor of Hoboken in New Jersey in the United States, Mr. Ravi Balla, as well as another leader, this time also from the youth constituency, Ms. Patrizia Gragnani. She's one of the members of the cities working group of the youth constituency. So in this session, I would like to have our discussion in two rounds. I would like to raise two questions to our panelists. And then I first want to hear about the vision, and then also would like to discuss about the way forward based on what we have been talking, and also with the inspirations between us. I'd like to start with Mayor Balla, being advantage of it's an initiative, or it's an event hosted by ICLEI. Obviously, we'd like to start with our members first. Mayor Balla, City of Hoboken is in fact recognized as the first US city to declare a climate emergency. And the date is interesting. It is as early as 2017. This is the year when there were no Fridays for Future on the streets. And it was the year where when US was pulled out of the Paris Agreement. So it was definitely a difficult year. And over these years, in the last couple of 4 years, City of Hoboken went further and it joined ICLA US pioneers who have committed to climate neutrality well before 2050 and even having ambitious targets on 2030. So you have been in this journey, both in your capacity as the member of the council, but also at the mayor's office. So you definitely know how it was, what it takes you to drive your community, to drive your staff, and how did you reach to the success in a country where it was particularly difficult over these couple of 4 or 5 years. Mayor Bala, we are eager to hear your experiences.
Sure, Eunice and the entire ICLEI team. First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this event. It's of critical importance from my perspective that we both discuss and trade notes in terms of our experiences, but also make sure that this is not a 1 or 2 day event, that the work we do, the work we talk about continues, well beyond and translates into action. I would say in terms of our recipe for success, needless to say, we have not achieved success, but we've created a pathway towards success. I think that entails 3 critical components. The first component is really framing the issue and framing the issue as an emergency. When you frame something as an emergency, it elevates naturally the issue in the consciousness of the citizenry, of the residents we represent. In my 4 years as mayor in Hoboken, we've only declared 2 emergencies. One was with the climate, declaring a climate emergency, and the second was with the COVID-19 pandemic. We had to declare a state of emergency. So, we want to impress upon the residents in Hoboken and beyond that this is an existential threat to our city. When I say existential threat, that means specifically that it threatens our future existence. If we don't act now, the very existence and being of Hoboken is at threat. So framing it as an emergency, I think, is very critical. Second, I think it's important to create a foundational document which sets forth very specific benchmarks. In 2019, Hoboken adopted its climate action plan. It's a 250-page document that crosses all areas of government and identifies ways to integrate climate action into almost anything we're doing here in Hoboken from a municipal standpoint, but also some very specific benchmarks that we want to work to and how we're going to work towards them. Among those is in terms of being net zero, we will be net zero by 2030 as a city and as a municipal government by 2025. So all of our municipal fleet or municipal vehicles will be fully electrified by that time using renewable sources of energy. And with respect to the city at large, we are engaged actively in what's called an energy aggregation program, which allows residents to opt into renewable sources of electricity for daily usage as citizens at lower prices, lower price points than traditional sources of energy. So creating benchmarks for net neutrality, but also being carbon neutral. We've set a benchmark of being carbon neutral by 2050 and government operations to be carbon neutral by 2035. And that also involves incentivizing and really developing an infrastructure of having electric vehicles, electric mobilization, micromobility, so that you don't need to rely upon vehicles that might give off greenhouse gas emissions that might impact our carbon neutrality goals. And then the third component really is public education. the recipe for success, in one sense, it comes top down in terms of leadership and having a true solid commitment towards these fundamental goals, which we might not realize in our lifetime, but we're conscious about future generations and the need to leave our planet in a better state than where we found it, and also making sure that we, on a very regular basis, do those little things to educate average people about the benefits of recycling or composting or having an electric vehicle or other modes of transportation that don't further the impact on our climate. This weekend, just this Saturday, we had our green team have an entire weekend of climate action. And so that third component of citizen action, not just government action, but grassroots citizen action, I think are components towards a recipe for a greater measure of success.
Excellent, excellent. In that sense, we can comfortably say that you're not alone. I mean, this success is applied in Makati, in Bonn. It will be here in a couple of minutes in Recife even. There's leaders, staff, and community engagement. So I think that is our three components of our success, and I'm very happy that you have underlined that. So let's go to Patricia. I mean, you have seen those good cases, but we're also aware that all these Fridays for Futures, all these demonstrations, you have been on the streets in thousands of cities, globally, millions of there. And you have seen, we still have hundreds of cities on this journey who are joining us. What do you think? How can we increase the number of cities, number of leaders like Mayor Balla or others? What is the thing that stops the demand on the streets to reach to the councils or to reach to the city halls? How do you see this? Where's the broken link from your perspective?
Okay, so I would like to start by thanking IGLE for inviting me today as a young representative. And I would also like to thank the audience. It's so nice to see that so many people around the world care about urban sustainability and climate change. So I am here today as a young representative, but I am also an academic. And this that you have asked is a very relevant question in academia, and one that my team and I tried to answer to with our academic research. So many municipalities, like those that are present here today and others, are trying to embrace environmental sustainability and the fight against climate change. However, we need to keep in mind that these are very ambitious goals for a local administration and goals that require both time and effort to be addressed. So together with my team, we have conducted an on-the-field research with the city of Lucca in Italy. In 2019, the city saw several strikes. The local young activists, mainly Fridays for Future and Earth Strike, demanded the local administration to take a bold step against climate change. So my team and I helped the city transition towards a planning process that takes environmental sustainability and climate mitigation into account. So we witnessed firsthand the challenges that a municipality can face in implementing such a relevant institutional shift. Specifically, in our research, we have identified three main obstacles to change. The first relates to the additional effort that the city faces when including environmental sustainability and climate change into its planning process, in addition to the everyday duties that the municipality has to fulfill. Many municipalities will obviously tell you that they don't have time or resources to implement such changes. The second obstacle that we found is related to the municipal employees who are close to retirement and therefore do not want to somehow trouble themselves with changing the modus operandi that they are accustomed to. The last obstacle is linked to a lack of interest or knowledge about environmental sustainability and climate change among some of the municipal employees who do not see these as important issues. So what I would like to say is that sometimes even though the demands that activists may raise on the street reach the councils, these can face substantial obstacles to their implementation. Now, these obstacles can be overcome if the municipality is willing to put time and effort in addressing them. And often, town councils need the trigger that will spark the change, which in the case of Lucca, it was given by young climate activists. So I believe that young climate activists are and will play a really essential role in this transition.
Excellent, excellent. I think that was really, really nice, let's say, complementary remarks that we have seen how Bonn for Future, for example, in the city of Bonn have evolved into an implementation model that with the city staff, with the administration, they have been working. I think there will be a lot of similar stories that we will hear. I will now go to our last round, but this time, when I go to Mayor Bala, I will raise the issue that obviously, you are now in a unique situation in the US. The US National Determined Contribution, the National Climate Action, is one of the most ambitious in terms of the embracing the multi-level collaboration. It even says that we are benefiting from the actions of the cities and states. So definitely this will fill a gap that is very, very important, which is a federal government. So you would be expecting to be much more successful. However, there may still be some obstacles. So what do you think could be the biggest barrier in your pathway as you formulated that you still have not reached your destination, but you're about to? What could be your biggest thing that could prevent you in your success in your journey to 2025, 2030, or 2050?
Excuse me, my thoughts are coming a little bit back to what Patricia had said a few minutes ago in terms of the value and impact that grassroots organizing and grassroots advocacy can have on a municipality. I will tell you, just at this very local level, Hoboken is a city of only 60,000 residents. But if you get a few activists who are really committed and do the work that's needed to educate the governing body as well as the community, that can have real change. There are some things that are challenges that are simply beyond our control. The previous presidential administration pulled out of the Paris Agreement. The administration did not even agree to participate or aspire to achieve the goals of the Paris Accords. That was something that's beyond the control and will be beyond the control of municipalities for years to come. Fortunately, we have an administration at the federal level right now under President Biden that is very strongly committed through Gina McCarthy and many others at the federal level to the ideological and the climate change action goals that we're discussing here. But those fluctuations are real challenges. They're big problems. I would say not so much so on the federal level, but even on the municipal and state level, if you have an administration. For example, my administration is very committed to achieving and exceeding the goals of the Paris Agreement. In terms of the benchmarks for various initiatives. But my term as mayor will only be 4 more years. I can't guarantee that my successor will share those same goals, and that applies in municipalities. The democratic municipalities throughout the country and probably the world, and same at the state level. There is an election which will determine many things, but among them, the state of New Jersey's commitment to climate action. And right now we have a governor who shares the vision of the president and the local mayor. So we have a very symbiotic relationship, but that creates, it's not, so.
No, I think that is the delicacy of living in democratic systems, and we were always saying that unfortunately there's nowhere in the world which has climate at the heart of the election, the ballot box. When people go to the ballot box, unfortunately, climate is not at the top priority. I'm now warned by the moderators of this session that we have to be wrapping up. So I'd like to go back to Patricia. First of all, thank you very much, Mayor Balla. Maybe you can summarize your comments in 1 minute about that because you have already touched about this, how youth can help. But maybe 1 minute of your wrapping comments in this discussion, because then we will continue with mayors of Recife, Yucatan, and Mayor of Des Moines as well.
So yes, I perfectly agree with what Mayor Balla said. Sometimes municipal governments don't have the autonomy or decisional power upon certain things. But I believe that young climate activists can really take somehow the lead into this. For example, I became part of the Yango Cities working group around last year. And I realized that inside Yango, there are a lot of really educated young professionals. Many are, for instance, urban planners, environmental engineers, public policy, early professionals, and so on. So in my view, Yango really has the knowledge and the skills to engage in a positive conversation with local administration. And I believe that positive conversation is really the key here. This is what we have seen, for example, in the project that I was talking about before with the city of Lucca, where the change was sparked by the protests of the Fridays for Future. And this resulted in the municipality actually including the Fridays for Future in the change, making them important stakeholders in this institutional change rather than seeing them as protesters. So as a result, the city of Lucca is periodically meeting with the Fridays for Future. They consult with them and they keep them updated on the process that the city is doing towards climate neutrality. I believe one of the climate activists is even an intern right now in the environment division of the city. So I believe that it's possible to engage in a cooperation with local administrations. And this is also important because young generations are those that will bear the cost of climate change and will also bear the effects of the climate policies that we are implementing today.
Excellent, excellent. And I see on the screen, Saida, the Vice Mayor Roldao, as well as Saida Rodriguez, they're all nodding their heads because their experience is exactly that, how youth can come into the politics and the administration and then make a change. So without further ado, I'd like to invite all my colleagues to join me in applauding Mayor Balla and Patricia. Just to remind, there is in the Hopin platform a poll going on that you can vote. We are already seeing that more than 60% of those participants are now saying that they are in a city who has declared climate emergency. That is really good that we are learning from each other and we are the pioneers to make concrete changes. I'd like to conclude that by the end of this week, we will also announce our call for transformation, and any participant of Daring Cities can also comment on that. And without further ado, I apologize for our moderator, Edgar, but I'd like to give you back the floor with this inspirational inputs to the next round.
Thank you, Yunus, and thanks to Patricia Gagnani and Mayor Ravi Balla. Excellent presentation. And now I'm so glad to moderate next session where we are honored to introduce Isabela de Roldao, Vice Mayoress in the city of Recife, Brazil, who will share how Recife became a pioneering city in Brazil through collaboration with ICLEI by declaring climate emergency in 2019. And then we'll introduce Saida Melina Rodriguez Gomez, State Secretary of Sustainable Development in the state of Yucatan, Mexico. And finally, Frank County Mayor of the city of Des Moines in USA, and also President of ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability. So please, Vice Mayoress Isabela de Roldao, the floor is yours.
Gratidão, Edgar, pela apresentação. Gostaria de compartilhar com vocês.
Thank you very much, Edgar, for the introduction. I'd like to share this very simple presentation that I put together to show you how Recife has been dealing with this urgent and pressing subject related to these goals. The important thing is that Recife, after a diagnosis that was done together with ICLE, was defined as the 16th most vulnerable city to the effects of climate change in the world. And with this diagnosis, we have been making decisions in the past 8 years to face climate change through concrete action to strengthen this fight against climate change. And we have decided to invest in sustainable economy, understanding that sustainability must crisscross the entire city. So social inclusion of residents from peripheral areas is extremely important if the entire city wants to work with one single point of focus. And since 2015, when Recife became part of ICLE, and when we were able to start the local plan to fight climate change, that was when in 2019, Recife became the first city in Brazil to publish a climate emergency decree defining the guidelines and public policies that we would adopt to reach carbon neutral by 2050. So we have the Alliance for Climate Action in Brazil, which is a network of business leaders, local governments, regional governments, academics, the press, religious entities, and the youth, focusing on reaching the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 and reach carbon neutral by 2050. So in this race to zero, this global campaign, we took on this commitment, this public commitment to create this favorable environment to fight climate change. And we're also working with MCR 2030 with the UNDRR and with the local climate action plan, or PLAC, that was built as a collaboration between the city of Recife, the youth, and civil society organizations, and mediated by ICLE. We defined 4 pillars: energy, sanitation, mobility, and resilience. And that is the basis of our principles of green economy, climate change, and nature-based solutions. And as an example of this partnership with ICLE and the electricity company of the city, we transformed we transformed actually the first women's hospital of Recife. We installed photovoltaic cells on the rooftop of these buildings. We also included climate sustainability and emergency as a required discipline for children at school. The municipality of Recife is also inclusive of youths in this discussion and the important actions that have been already planned for the future. Recife will be the first city in Brazil to celebrate its 500th anniversary. So we have a plan for 2037, which is when we're going to reach that number. We have the Capibaribe Park. We want to transform this area in Recife, an active mobility plan where we encourage people to use bicycles to go to work and for their leisure activities, actions in the periphery, actions focusing on recycling activities to transform waste into important and sellable products. And we have collection stations across the city. We also have an urban agriculture secretariat, the children's park. And I would like to thank you and share a sentence with you said by Jonas Salk that says that if all of the insects disappeared from the face of the earth within 50 years, human life would end on Earth. But if all human beings disappeared from Earth within 50 years, all other forms of life would flourish. And it is with a focus on this responsibility that we face the fight against climate change. And these are some of our successful experiences as the city of Recife. I would also like to thank ICLEI for supporting us in this collective construction that crisscrosses all of the actions and secretariats within the municipal administration of Recife. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Recife. Now I'm so pleased to introduce Sandra Zaida Melina, Secretary of Sustainable Development in the state of Yucatan. Zaida, the floor is yours.
Muchas gracias, Edgar. Muchas gracias a ICLEI por la oportunidad de...
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to ICLEI for this opportunity of acquiring the experiences for helping us reaching the goals we have meant to achieve. And the panelists and previous panelists, they mentioned things that I also would like to answer in 3 different words. I think that the national governments, the subnational governments, we do have our responsibility. We have to commit not only to the post-pandemic scenario, but also as an opportunity through which we can recover and we can rebuild economies with from a different perspective, from the perspective of the climate well-being. And we want to establish our goals and put together the sustainable development goals and to focus on sustainable development and economy at the same time. And we in Yucatan, we have a state plan that's aligned and monitored and reported through the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and that has allowed us to develop policies that will make we work on both topics at a time. We want to create policies that will outlive us, and at the same time, we are implementing actions that will allow us to obtain results that are effective and tangible results for the society we are living in now. So there's some issues that come up when we consider how we implemented this journey in Yucatan. And the questions are, why? Why should we have this sustainable development vision? And the second question would be, how should we achieve that, establishing the roadmap, establishing actions, and looking for the necessary awakenings that will change paradigms, and how are we going to act upon it? So we have done that by developing policies aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, and at the same time, we built together with the academia, the experts that know this problem more deeply, we have created a panel of monitoring. So for instance, to fight against the effects of global warming. And that's interesting because from the Yucatan state, we had no environmental actions. So we created a climate change law for Yucatan, but with an innovative vision, so that we could talk about carbon sequestration and other topics that are a part of this law that fights against greenhouse effects as well. So we are working on different actions. There are three of them, which are the most important ones. And there is the first one of them is the mobility issue, and it has to do with what Recife has been working on. And we have been focusing on infrastructure so that we can have an infrastructure for cyclists, for bikers, and also a green infrastructure based on the presence of nature, and to recover 140 kilometers of bike lanes. That's one of our goals in Yucatan. And the second topic is energy. It's energy related. And when we are considering energy, it's not, the energy must be accessible to everybody. It must be accessible in rural and remote areas. And at the same time, we aim to produce renewable energies. And Yucatan has 300 megas installed with different projects, with 67 distributed, and we have produced 25% of every energy through renewable projects. So those are the biggest goals we have. And then we come to the third topic, to the third pillar, which is waste reduction. So, and that has another question that needs to be answered, is with whom? And that's when we come to the participation of citizens in general, but also the NGOs of the academia and the private initiatives. So we have a strategy, a very interesting strategy, which is Yucatan zero residues. So we believe that by carrying out such initiatives, we are going to be visualizing, and we are going to be showing the society how important it is to do that, to implement a resilient vision and the fight against climate change. So, and that's all. I'd like to thank you from Yucatan. And of course, I'd like to take the opportunity to invite you to come here and visit us. Thank you.
Pleasure to hear you again. Now, I would like to introduce Frank County, Mayor, City of Des Moines, United States, and President of ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. Mayor County, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon, good day, wherever it is that you exist. You know, this is an important effort that is being moved forward, and it's been exciting listening to the other mayors and representatives represent what needs to happen, how we're working together, and as part of our climate emergency, mobilization. Our session, we hope we're going to discuss the difference between ongoing climate action and the action in state of climate emergency. This is, we are, as well as, the dimensions of the urgency and the need to act now and the significant risks of inaction. My interest in getting involved with ICLEI in all this is we watched the changes happen over our lifetimes, and knowing that there's things that have to happen. The extreme climate events that are taking place in our city and our state in this country, and quite frankly around the world, are shocking. We're seeing much more frequent extreme events. I mean, and for a lot of us, as we looked at coastal regions, even around the United States, with extreme storm events coming out of the Atlantic and the Pacific, and coming up through the Caribbean area. It's affecting the United States and Mexico, as we have heard earlier. And Here, even in Des Moines, Iowa, in 2018, we had a storm event where we saw 10 inches of rain in 3.5 hours. I mean, those are once in a lifetime kind of events that are happening much more frequently. And we have to become aware of them, and we have to move beyond just planning, and let's move towards action and see what we can make happen. You know, this 6th Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report is clear. We have no more time to wait. The drastic effects of climate change are fueling catastrophic events around the globe. We're no longer, as I said a minute ago, we no longer have the time to just plan. You know, we have to move to action. It's an all-in approach, and we've developed with nations and other mayors and other local governments and all levels of government in to helping make our progress much more quickly. It needs to involve partnerships, you know, with private corporations who champion the transition to combat climate change. Local governments and nations are facing multiple competing threats. And as I said, we here in Des Moines, we saw floods, we've seen wildfires, we've seen hurricanes, economic hardships, we've seen refugee resettlement as a result of storm events or droughts, you know, that have caused famines. And so relocation of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, and knowing, as we have discussed over the last number of years, that this can take place not for 100,000 or 1 million people or 2 million people, as you know we saw in Syria, for instance, but hundreds of millions of people with sea level rise and people beginning to have to think about where they're going to live, what they're going to do. So we know our efforts towards sustainability make the biggest impact when we're all working together. But we also know that we need the right tools to implement the change. Local government leaders need to engage our global envoys to share experiences and ideas and visions. And creating partnerships with our multilateral institutions can form dialogues that influence audiences abroad, at our own homes, and as I say, around the world. Local governments, we're beginning to take action and demonstrating the ability to decisively act and develop measures to combat climate change. Public and private enterprises can mutually advocate and support one another through policy and funding and technical resources to do more. So local governments, from my standpoint, and I'm sure all of us, must lead by example and provide a blueprint for the future if we're going to have a success. And I want to say that ICLEI's Race to Zero, which helps align current goals with science-based targets. And I'll quickly talk about what's going on in our city in Des Moines. And we're responsible, obviously, for our share. We're implementing specific high-impact action through the next year. We're focused on creating alternative fuel fleet transition plan. We're transitioning passenger cars and vehicles to electric vehicles. We're looking for 100% biodiesel pilot for our refuse trucks. We're making EV ready facilities and charging infrastructure and installations around our cities so that as we move to EVs, people have place to charge them. And identify and promote non-motorized alternatives. So the city of Des Moines has a commitment to address climate emergency as have never been seen before. And we're the first major city to adopt a 24/7 clean energy commitment we now join a diverse set of global partners for corporate, government, utility, and energy services industries to transform our whole energy sector by ensuring that every kilowatt hour of electricity we consume is met with carbon-free energy resources. And I will tell you that as of today, our distributed energy provider is up to over 83% of their total production. And we have pushed that for the last decade as we have worked with them to do it, and so that we can decarbonize our grid rapidly where it counts, both close to home and across this distributed area. And we hope that it's a model for others to follow. Snuffing out our fossil fuels improves the air we breathe, the quality of our water resources, and prevents irreversible and unbearable climate disasters, we hope, and the threat of which grows, as we have all said, more apparent every single day. Investing in 24/7 clean energy grids is an investment in our future. And I think that we all ought to combine and share our ideas on how to get that done. And it creates jobs and improves equitable access to energy for all, and strengthens community resilience for each of us as we
1
achieve,
minute, Mayor.
and ensures our kids and our grandkids, we leave them a world they can live in.
Thank you, Mayor County. I would like to thank Isabela de Roldao, Saida Melina Rodriguez Gomez, and our ICLEI President, Frank County, for the great thoughts and experiences they share. Now, it is a pleasure to present the Making the Most of Daring Cities 2021 by DEO.
Welcome to Daring Cities 2021. We're so excited to welcome you. For the next 5 days, we'll all be a part of a global exchange. You'll join thought leaders and practitioners from around the world while we explore the daring cities and regions that are taking bold climate action. Attend high-level sessions and technical trainings and workshops to deepen your knowledge on implementable solutions and approaches. Be sure to create a profile on Hopin and take advantage of the networking opportunities to directly connect with fellow Daring Cities participants from around the world. On October 8, we'll review our outcomes and prepare for the second Daring Cities cornerstone, Disseminate. Throughout Urban October, the Daring Cities outcomes will be delivered at global events so that leaders from around the world hear what local and regional leaders need to be able to follow through on the ambitious climate action needed to tackle the climate emergency. Finally, as part of our third cornerstone, Advocate, we'll bring our message to COP26, and you're invited. Join us either virtually or in person at the Multi-Level Action Pavilion to see and hear from our local and regional leaders and bring the Daring Cities message to the world stage. The journey of Daring Cities 2021 begins today. We're so glad you've decided to be a part of leading in the climate emergency. Welcome.
In this sense, we are finishing this panel, so we just want to ask you to join us for the next panel that will share exemplary cases of regional leaders who have not only declared a climate emergency, but are also rapidly advancing on 2030 targets toward climate neutrality by 2050, with innovative practices on integrating nature-based solutions and building on their experiences dealing with the COVID-19 emergency. The need, importance, and benefits of building partnership within communities will also be highlighted. Thanks for joining us and have a great day.